And now we come to one of the more famous episodes of Thunderbirds, Terror in New York City.
Dun, dun, dun.
Now this one was famous mainly because it featured Thunderbird 2 getting shot down, but we'll get to that in a minute. What's interesting about this episode is that it opens up in media res, right in the middle of a rescue during all of the tension. I think it's an oil rig that's on fire or something.
Yeah, there's an oil rig on fire, and then we see the debut of another piece of machinery I don't think you see very much often. We haven't seen before. It's called the Firefly.
The Firefly.
It's kind of like a bulldozer, but Virgil is driving it, and he uses we think it's a smoke bomb to decimate the fire.
It's used a lot as a piece of firefighting equipment. It's one of my favourite pod vehicles.
I think what's good about this is that it opens up in the middle of a rescue, so it goes to show the international rescue are never, sitting on their laurels.
And the fact that maybe there are more rescues that go untold that we haven't seen, like a dime a dozen rescues that happen that aren't necessarily recorded in Thunderbirds episodes. Maybe they're not exciting enough. Like maybe saving cats out of trees or something.
Because this is just an oil rig that's on fire. But anyway, what starts off here is that this is where it establishes the story. And you got these two journalists who try to photograph Thunderbird 1, but eventually it's a sign of karma, and Scott ends up wiping their camera, like their film, with electromagnets.
Magnets?
Yeah, bitch! Magnets! Oh!
But anyway,
job,
these two reporters, Ned Cook and his cameraman Joe, they're shown as being really eccentric and in way over their heads. Of course, that comes to bite them back later on in the story. But anyway, returning from this opening rescue, Thunderbird 2 is flying over the sea, and he's attacked by a US ship known as the Sentinel, which mistakes it, an unidentified flying object of course, as something hostile. Obviously 2065 is as paranoid as today is. And they shoot down Thunderbird 2 in what is most likely the tensest moment in the episode, when Virgil struggles to regain control of Thunderbird 2 and has an intense crash landing, just barely escaping with his life on Tracy Island.
I just wonder if that was meant to be a metaphor for friendly fire in war, or because if you're being so secretive of many organisations, how do we know that there aren't many stories we don't know of say, spies or secret couriers or so getting killed by accident because of mistaken identity or not knowing who they are.
And as a result of the Sentinel's mistaken attack, Thunderbird 2 is taken out of commission. And Thunderbird 2, of course, is arguably the most important craft in International Rescue's fleet. It carries all the rescue equipment to and fro. Without Thunderbird 2, no means of transporting rescue equipment.
So now we come to the main problem, the main rescue of the episode, and that's that the Empire State Building is being moved, like physically moved from its current position to another, because there's a big redevelopment plan going on in New York. Now, it's one of the biggest, it still is one of the biggest buildings in the world, so because you've been up it, haven't you?
I've been up 3 times. It's a big building. The view is magnificent, by the way, both at day and at night. But how do you go about moving such a massive skyscraper? Well, the answer is they build this gigantic machinery that just literally grabs it and shimmies it along on some tracks. But of course, it's doomed to disaster. And a tremor in the middle of New York causes something of a mini earthquake. Not only are Ned Cook and his reporter Joe, the reporters from earlier, who, again, way over their head, sticking around in this dangerous situation, they get buried under by the falling Empire State Building during this tremor. So they find themselves buried under a mountain of rubble, somewhat like 100 feet under New York, with water slowly rising up.
It's kind of an interesting metaphor for any kids who want to be journalists, that if you end up going into, say, like a war zone or a danger zone, always be careful. Have your wits about you.
Crazy fool, why doesn't he get the heck out of it?
Well, like you said, Dad, he'd do anything for his story.
And then we come to Brains, who comes up with his theory that there are underground rivers underneath New York, which is very understandable. I mean, if you've got something as big and strong as, say, the Hudson, there's bound to be smaller rivers beneath, perhaps within the rock or the crust of the earth.
And now we come to the major dilemma of the story, with these two reporters having only hours left to live before they drown. How are you going to get Thunderbird 4 all the way from the Pacific to New York without using Thunderbird 2? And it's something of it's a nice redemption story, because it turns out that the answer lies in the people who shot down Thunderbird 2 in the first place. The Sentinel is able to carry Thunderbird 4 all the way to New York just in the nick of time.
And so that way that Gordon is eventually able to get to the danger zone, and even though it's a real race against time to get underneath New York and find Ned and Joe, he does it eventually, and it just goes to show that Gordon, he's doing his job for the first time. He's an aquanaut, he's underwater, and he's dealing with the first big disaster that's at sea. So far in the series, we've had a disaster in the air, trapped in the sky, on land with the Sidewinder falling into the pit of peril, and we've also had a sort of a mystery spy thriller.
A spy thriller with Perils of Penelope.
But now we've got our first major sea disaster, which is two men trapped underwater.
And with that, I find it funny, the debut of Thunderbird 4 without famously being deployed from the pod of Thunderbird 2. Which is what you would think. For the first time you see Thunderbird 4, it's not coming out of the pod number 4, it's just being taken over there by the Sentinel.
And by the look of it, it's a pretty fast watercraft to go underneath. It's a very good submarine. But something that really pricked up my mind, being such a big Jerry Anderson buff, is where are the World Aquanaut Security Patrol?
Where is Stingray and where is Troy Tempest during this great time of need?
Is he too busy away having it off with Atlanta or Marina?
Marina, Aquamarina.
I think that's the only thing anyone really remembers about Stingray.
Yeah, I love that ending song. It's really good. I think, Terror in New York City is definitely one of the tensest episodes ever in Thunderbirds. I think that's why it's so famous. There is a lot of uncertainty with the episode. Not, Thunderbird 2 getting shot down. That's something that they just pull out of the air as, okay, we've blown up Thunderbird 2. Anything can happen now.
And also, it's kind of a historical point because it's setting up this future world where there is no more Empire State Building. And, I'll just say this... A little bit of trivia here is in the opening shots of the Mysterons, the first episode of Captain Scarlet, you have a shot of New York, and there is the Empire State Building. So why is it still there if it was demolished in Thunderbirds?
Maybe they rebuilt it.
Who knows? Maybe that's Empire State Building Mark II.
Trying to pass it off as the old Empire State Building again.
And speaking now, as we're both kids who have grown up after 9/11, there's a great deal of 9/11 or. Sort of a great deal of, say, imagery to it that could remind us of 9/11.
Yeah, the similarities to the September 11th attacks are very obvious and a little bit eerie. These two reporters being trapped under all this rubble of a collapsed skyscraper. Even the title, Terror in New York City.
I do wonder if any censors thought that this was an episode that shouldn't be shown following 9/11.
Yeah, I didn't do any research, but I think after 9/11, if there were any reruns of Thunderbirds in America, I seriously doubt it, but if there were any, they probably would have cut that episode.
So this is one of those episodes maybe not a lot of Americans have seen in the last 15 years, perhaps. So it's kind of good that we're doing this and we're showing you the clips from it. And I like how this is a very good debut of a lot of good machinery, but it also goes to show the attention and detail used in these puppets, because the first thing we see is that because these puppets are, because the characters have been up such a long time, as if they haven't slept, you can see that Gordon and Scott and Virgil have 5 o'clock shadow.
It's nice little touches of detail, like you pointed out earlier, the sweat on their faces as well. Now we bring in 5 o'clock shadow. The little details like that, say so much without saying anything.
And the thing, one last thing before we go, is that this is the debut of a character who is going to become a bit interesting later on.
Are you talking about Grandma?
Yes,
Grandma
Tracy. Who is established to be Jeff Tracy's mother. She doesn't have any lines, you just see her right at the end.
She is a lovable character when she does end up speaking. I think she's a couple of episodes away, but ultimately we will get to Grandma Tracy, who's an excellent source of comic relief, along with Parker.
Oh yes, very much.
But yeah, that was it for Terror in New York City. Certainly one of my favourite episodes. I don't know about you.
Well, I assume it's one of your episodes because you're such a New Yorker fan.
Oh yeah, I love New York. They put it on a t-shirt. Anyway, thank you very much, and tune in for the next episode.
FAB.
FAB.